Good day, everyone. A very warm welcome to the third webinar on the GIIS Healthline. GIIS has always been particular about the safety of our students. We have a strong shield for emotional health of our students, which is extended through student counselors who are available to solve any issues students may face. Students of all ages and grades deal with emotions just like adults do. Fights with friends, stress due to homework, finding some subjects difficult to understand, or being bullied by peers are stress-causing elements in a student's life. Even though their issues may seem minor inconveniences to us adults, they are a major source of worry for the children. And if not dealt on time, can become a huge blockage for their proper, wholesome development in future. While GIS has a dedicated healthline, an online platform accessible to students 24/7, through which parents and students can reach out to our student counselors, class and subject teachers also have a responsibility to identify a worried child and approach him or her with a helping hand. But how do students reach out? In this webinar, we will be talking about a very important topic in student well-being, and that is helping students find the right channel to reach out for help. I am Melissa Maria, Principal of the Smart Campus in Singapore. I will be your host and moderator for the session. As an educator with years of experience, I have had the opportunity to work with students aged 2.5 years to 18 years in my career, spanning more than 25 years. I have a master's degrees in humanities and a bachelor's major with honors in psychology, with a certificate in counseling. Over the years, my qualifications as well as my experience of working with children has sensitized me deeply to understand the fundamental and development needs of children, as well as respect their uniqueness. Empathy and kindness have become critical in my approach towards children. It is my proud privilege to welcome our panelists this evening. Let me begin by introducing Mr. Seth Howerton. He has a MSc in Teacher Education and Assistive Technology. He is licensed by the state of Tennessee as a technology specialist and holds licenses for both K-12 modified and comprehensive special education. He has extensive experience with promoting emotional self-regulation through cognitive behavioral therapy. Seth's research interests include accessibility, self-regulation, communication disorders, and UI design. Seth is our SANE facilitator at our GIIS campus, Tokyo. Welcome, Seth, to this webinar. I now introduce Sabahat Fatima. She has completed her master's in applied psychology with a specialization in counseling. She has worked in both clinical as well as school settings. She has successfully researched into the field of educational psychology, focusing on academic confidence and learning environment. She is a member of Singapore Association of Counselling, and she's further exploring how positive psychology can and shape the benefit young minds. She is our behavior counselor at the GIIS Smart Campus Singapore. Welcome, Sabahat. I now welcome Ms. Gauri Agarwal. She is an experienced clinical educational psychologist with a demonstrated history of working in the industry. She is skilled in CBT, transactional analysis, group therapy, social psychology and family therapy, and clinical and academic psychological testing. Strong healthcare service professional with a master's in psychology, focused in clinical psychology and master's in educational psychology from the University College London. Currently, she's our school counselor and psychology teacher at our GIIS Abu Dhabi campus. Welcome, Gauri, to the webinar.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I have Tripti Musadi. She is a special educator and cognitive behavior therapist who is pursuing her advanced certificate course on learning disabilities. She has completed a course in transformative science of cognitive behavioral therapy from the Academy of Modern Applied Psychology. She has a rich experience of serving in Vibgyor Roots and Rise and STEM World School. She has presented a paper at the National Seminar Comes CRE program on independent adult living. She is our counselor at the Ahmedabad campus. Welcome, Tripti, to the webinar.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dear listeners, before we begin, here are some house rules for the webinar. Parents who have specific questions with relation to the webinar content can post their questions to the question answer session in the Zoom app. Our online panelist will answer as many questions live as possible. At the end of the session, we will take questions from this section and direct them to the respective team members who will reply them live for you. We also humbly request all our listeners to listen to the entire webinar before posting your questions, as your concerns may be responded to during the webinar. I now invite Seth Howerton to share with all our listeners his thoughts on our theme today, reaching out, helping our students reach out. Yes, Seth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Melissa, ma'am. Today, I want to first thank all of our parents and teachers to make time to be here for today's webinar. I thought today's topic, finding the right avenues to reach out, would be an excellent time to talk about 4 things we can do to promote self-advocacy in our students. And today I want to talk to all of us, not only as parents, but I'm sure we have some teachers in the audience as well, and would like to also offer some advice for what teachers can do in the classroom, as well as what parents can do in the home. So first, let's talk about this term self-advocacy through some scenarios. I want you to imagine these situations and think about whether or not they've applied to you and your child. The first one, you meet your child after they return home from school. You ask them how their day was, and the only response they give is, "Good, I had a good day." And that's the end of the conversation. Imagine this as a teacher. Say you ask students if they have any doubts or questions at the end of a lesson, and nobody has anything to say. I'm sure some of us have experienced that. Here's another one. You receive a report that your child has had some behavior issues at school. When you try to talk with them about it, they get upset or avoid the situation, and you're unable to find out why they acted the way that they did. These are just some examples, but there are many reasons why students struggle to ask for help. And in all of these situations, the student is withholding information from you. They're not telling you about what happened in their day at school. They're not telling you if they have any doubts or questions at the end of a difficult topic. And they're not telling you whether or they have an issue, why they're acting the way that they are. But there are many strategies we can use to help them become stronger self-advocates. So self-advocacy. This is the ability to recognize one's own need for assistance and take the necessary steps to obtain it. So it's both. It's both the awareness of, I'm having a hard time, and the ability to find someone or something to help you achieve the things that you're struggling with. So as I've written here, self-advocacy requires for students to first recognize that they're struggling. This relies on honesty and self-awareness. And sometimes this is a skill that we have to teach as parents and teachers. Then once students recognize that they're struggling, they may feel shame or embarrassment. In some of those examples I previously mentioned, I'm sure feelings of shame or embarrassment might play into that. Some students may be embarrassed to ask for help in the classroom, embarrassed to ask for help from their parents. They fear that asking for help shows weakness or failure. Even though as parents and teachers, we should always remind them that asking for help is instead a sign of maturity and strength. And we'll talk about some ways that we can do that. So I want to today talk about 4 strategies that we can start using to promote self-advocacy in our children. So the first strategy is practice metacognition. This is just a fancy way to say thinking about our thinking. As students, they can self-reflect and monitor their own behavior. Even as young as kindergarten, students are never too young to start thinking about how they're feeling, thinking about why they're feeling what they're feeling. And of course, maybe with younger students, that's a very simple thing. How do you feel? Oh, well, I feel sad. Why do you feel sad? And maybe it's in easy terms or child-friendly language, but this is a good practice for students to get into, to self-reflect on their own behavior. And of course, as adults, modeling this process makes it easy for students to understand. I mentioned previously, we have to teach those self-awareness skills, and this is one way to do that. So for parents, one way to practice metacognition, praise students for academic achievements by asking good questions. Don't just say, oh, you had wonderful marks on your test. That doesn't give students an opportunity to think about their thinking. Instead, ask a question like, well, this project required a lot of work. How did you prepare for it? Can you identify one strategy you've been using that has helped you to be successful? Not only does this praise the student, but it gives them the opportunity to practice metacognition, to self-reflect and think about their thinking. As teachers, after a test, we can also maybe ask some useful questions, maybe about how they studied, how much time they spent studying, their test grades, and maybe what they'll do differently next time if they didn't do so well on the test. I think oftentimes as teachers, we can overlook these important things and just focus on the score. When we have discussions like this, we can continue to build those self-advocacy skills. And I also want to say that this applies for behavior incidents as well. Telling a student they are naughty or bad is never beneficial or productive. Yes, of course, the behavior that they exhibit may be bad or unacceptable in the given context, but that doesn't make the child bad. If anything, telling a student they're naughty or bad is just going to prevent them from coming to you for help in the future. So I caution you as teachers and as parents to focus more on the behavior. How can we change the behavior instead of writing off a child as bad or naughty? So our next skill, this kind of transitions into what I just talked about. Adults are here to help. Students need to understand that all of us are part of their team. Parents, teachers, school staff, we're all part of their team. We're there to support and help them. Sometimes students are afraid to reach out for help due to fear of disappointing the adults in their lives. So here are some ways that we can address that. As parents, ask your child to list the adults they can trust and rely on in their daily life. Also, have a discussion about adults that you trusted when you were their age. Oftentimes, we don't share our experiences with our children about when we were their age. And this is a powerful tool. You can say, when I was your age, I really trusted my classroom teacher. I trusted my parents. I trusted my school counselor. You can model that behavior for the student. As teachers, you can do an activity where students have to guess why you became a teacher. Simple as that. Have them get into groups and share their ideas with the class, but don't give away your answer. And ultimately, you want to guide them to the answer that teachers are teachers because we want to help, because we like to support our students. And we want to ultimately guide their thinking to this. Let's move on to our third skill, brainstorm conversations. Students who are introverted or shy may feel overwhelmed or anxious about initiating a conversation. They may not have the words to use to tell people about their situation and their worries. Research shows that having students brainstorm about ways to start a conversation increases their mental flexibility and creative problem solving. So in helping them think of conversations and ways to tell people about their feelings, they become not only better self-advocates, they become better problem solvers. These are skills that carry out through the entire school life, academically, behaviorally, emotionally. So what can we do? Well, as parents, we can role play. We can role play with our child about different ways to ask for help, using conversation starters such as, well, I'm not sure what I need. Can you talk with me? Can you give me advice about something? And other things you can brainstorm together. And as parents, maybe you can use with the child from time to time. Maybe you can, when you feel upset, you can go to the child and say, I'm not sure what I need. Can you talk with me? And practice together. As teachers, we can also make this very easy for students. You can tell your students when they need help, they only need to use 2 words. I'm struggling. And we can start the process from there. We don't have to have students tell us everything about a situation to reach out for help. We can find out the real problems later. It's that initial push to get students to approach us. Other things teachers can do are to find creative ways for students to ask for help, such as maybe putting an eraser in the corner of their desk or a secret signal. So they don't have to say anything. They don't have to tell the entire class they're struggling, but maybe they can show you in a secret way, and you as the teacher know this student needs help, and you can address the problem later. And lastly, we can create a secure environment. Students need to feel safe in order to be vulnerable and honest enough to ask for help. Teachers should encourage a climate of curiosity, risk-taking, and openness. Again, we're all people, we're all support for the student. We're on the student's team, and we want to create an environment where the student feels supportive and feels safe in doing things that might be scary or new, uncomfortable. So parents, you can model self-talk when doing something that requires being brave and risk-taking. This can be as simple as talking about a difficult thing that happened at work and talking about the thought process you went through and how you overcame that stressful situation. You can also create an environment where your family can speak openly about making mistakes and how to fix them together. I think this is important for parents to do as well. Children need to view adults in their lives as fallible. We all make mistakes, but we can all learn to fix them. And for parents to model that behavior for the child, they're going to be more comfortable in making mistakes and finding solutions in the future. Teachers, we can use team building activities to build a sense of community in the classroom. Your classroom should be a safe space, and all of the students should feel they're part of a community. We should highlight all students' strengths in different areas through different kinds of activities. We shouldn't just place an emphasis on academic performance. Yes, it's important, and yes, it's something that kids should be proud of, but we should also brag on students for being thoughtful, for being kind, for being wise, and for being risk takers. And lastly, we should have clear expectations for routines and behaviors. And I feel like this applies to both parents and teachers. A lot of issues and behavior problems, misunderstandings happen because students don't know how to act in a situation. They don't know what's expected of them. And so we should always be clear on what we expect for students in certain situations, whether that's walking down the hallway to the restroom or studying for a test. We should have clear expectations on this is the behavior we're looking for, and this is what's going to happen if you don't follow that behavior. So these are just some 4 ideas to kind of start practicing building self-advocacy in our students. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak today, and I want to turn this over to Miss Melissa Ma'am to continue with the webinar. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Seth. That was really very, very insightful and excellent tips given to our audience of parents, teachers, and students. Before we proceed with our panel discussion, we would like to remind our parents and students that we had launched our GIIS healthline platform for all our students. It's a completely confidential platform that can be accessed by all our students through a WhatsApp number that is reflected on your screen. All those students who feel overwhelmed or troubled for whatever reason and would need an unbiased and professional listener to reach out to them can access this platform. Our counselors will reach out to them with various options to address their discomfort. We strongly believe that this would be a great source of enabling well-being among our students. More details have been shared with the parent community via mails from your respective campuses, and we will reshare those. You may use the number that is shown. We will now proceed to our panel discussion. And to answer my first question, I will invite Seth. Seth, how can parents help their child deal with mental health concerns?
Thank you, Miss Melissa. I think that some of the strategies that I spoke about previously serve as a good starting point. But in general, I think that we should begin to create a culture of talking about more things than just our academic performance at school. I think parents should get in the habit of asking about what good thing or bad thing happened today, and to guide discussions outside of an academic context. That way, students can start to feel more comfortable telling you about other things that happen in their school day. It's not just studying in a classroom all day. It's talking with your friends at lunch. It's sports. It's arts. It's after school activities. And sometimes when we're busy and we're focusing on the things that happen in our lives, we forget that it's a holistic education. There's more parts to it. And if parents can start to talk to their children about these other parts, and to also talk about the maybe not so great parts, the parts that they struggle with, the parts that maybe make them a little scared or uncomfortable, then the students are going to feel more comfortable telling you these things and maybe start to bring these issues to your attention. I also think that parents, should they receive a report from the school about a concern, that they should approach the child with a calm and neutral mindset. Sometimes we can get upset and we can let that cloud our interpretation of a situation. But when we talk to our children about what's going on, what maybe went wrong, or what choice they should not have made, we should approach it with a calm and clear head and say, hey, I'm on your team. It's okay to make a mistake, but let's find a way to fix it together so it doesn't happen again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Seth. Gauri, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am. Please tell me.
How can a good student counselor relationship be built, according to you?
Ma'am, most of us try to build, a relationship which is harmonious, like to get along with each other. But when it comes to counseling, building relationships is one of the most crucial factors for a successful being together. And in that, the first important thing is connect, to have the connect with each other, that is the student and the counselor. Here it basically recognizes that we have different points of view, and yet you're allowed to communicate without feeling judged, or someone is having a negative viewpoint about you or being guilty. When students have that kind of rapport with the student, with the counselor, they are going to openly share their thoughts and feel respected and understood. Similarly, I would like to say four key points that, in my experience, which is very important to, as key elements, is trust, listening, empathy, and laughter. And when you know the rules and understanding of a counseling relationship, it is definitely going to be successful, and it will give the child plus the student the confidence that I'm going to see positive results as well. So that's my viewpoint, ma'am, on how to build a good student counselor relationship.
Thank you so much, Gauri. Tripti, maybe I'll ask you the next question.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
can a student expect the counselor to ask them in the first session that they come across?
Yes, ma'am. That's very important because generally, when someone comes to counselor, they are very worried what they are going to ask. They are going to judge me. So generally, focus in first session is building good relationship and trust. So we do not talk a lot. We listen. We let students speak. So we generally ask just basic questions: what they like, what they don't like, who are their friends. So these are just basic questions that we ask, and we just give them non-judgmental listening. So that is a focus of our first session.
I so totally agree with you, Tripti. I think it is applicable to all of us when we start building rapport with somebody that we are meeting for the first time. I think, listening is the key to building a very strong relationship. So thank you so much for that response. Sabahat, I'm going to ask you the next question. Uh, is reaching out to friends enough to deal with any concerns, any mental health concerns students may have?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think most students that come to me have that question. Like, I've reached out to my friend, I've told her about my feelings, yet somehow I still feel like this. So I would like to say that though it is good to inform someone else, and it is the first step of reaching out about the stressors you're facing or the turmoil you're facing, it sometimes may not be enough. Because though friends are great listeners and they give advice that works, a therapist is the only person that is trained and has been educated to improve your mental health and knows the skills and therapies that is required. And the most important thing to know here is that they know how to do this without risking any damage to your mental health or anything like that. Because sometimes a friend gives us advice and it may work or it may not work. And when it doesn't work, it leads to a strain in the personal relationship. So the therapeutic relationship that we're talking about here is very fundamentally and functionally different from friendship. Hence why it is essential to be able to a student to go speak to a therapist or counselor, not just their friends.
Yes, Sabahat. Again, I couldn't agree more. I think it's critical that students understand that yes, friendships are important, but we have trained professionals in our schools who can actually help them address the concerns that they have. Uh, I'm going to go back to Gauri.
Yes,
Gauri, I have another question for you.
sure, ma'am.
And the question is, just give me 1 second. Yeah. Um, this is a very critical point. How does confidentiality work for a student counselor relationship?
So, a school counselor who is in a counseling relationship with a student has a ethical and a legal obligation to keep the information contained within that relationship itself. Okay, confidentiality is an ethical and a legal term. That is whatever is communicated in the counseling session is supposed to be between the counselor and the student. But we might come across a situation where a student might give us certain information which might be either harmful to the student, either harmful to someone else, or harmful globally, or something which is not okay. So then these are certain ground rules that we discuss before the counseling session, and let the child, we confirm to the child and we assure the child that whatever you tell us is going to be confidential and it will not go out, which includes even counseling records. So if generally, if we counselors maintain a record of whatever sessions we have, but they are only with us unless if there is any harm to the child, any harm to the parent, any harm to any other stakeholders around, including the child, then yes, in that also there's a confidential protocol which is followed. So you don't never go and approach a teacher directly, or there's always a system which is put into place that you report to the principal or a senior authority and then take it from there, so that the child doesn't feel a breach of trust or a breach of as someone has betrayed. Then then you don't want to believe the counselor, whereas our job is for them to trust in us and build that we will be able to give them a brighter tomorrow, or at least help them get out of the situation they are in right now, make them feel better about themselves. So yes, we do maintain confidentiality, but at any point if it's harming them or they are harming someone else or someone is harming them, we have a protocol in place, but again keeping in mind that their trust is not breached in any way or any form, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gauri. I think that's beautifully answered. And I want to reassure all our students who are on listening, teachers, parents, that our counselors hold confidentiality in very, very high, state. It's very important for them to win and to maintain the trust of the students that go to them. Sabahat, let me ask you. We are talking about the counselor, children. We are talking about teacher. But what role do you think parents play in this entire process when the child is reaching out, for help?
That's a really good question, and that's our focus of our discussion as well. Mr. Seth clearly highlighted certain things that parents could do to advocate the child reaching out for help or to reinforce the child reaching out for help. Similarly, a collaborative effort is very much required from both the child and the parent for a successful counselor student relationship. The parent can strive to create such an environment at home which facilitates the child to speak, or to speak about himself, speak about his feelings. When the child feels like it's not an odd thing or it's not something out of the blue to talk about the feelings, then it becomes a very helpful tool in the counseling relationship, because it's up to the child to speak and to discuss how they're feeling. So instead of it just looking at it from a counselor student relationship, I do think parents play a huge role in teaching the child how to express their feelings and how to speak up and how to stand for themselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabahat. Seth, I have another question for you. Uh, How can a student start assessing their mental health in order to understand if they really need help?
Excellent question, and I think it's one that I've actually heard a lot. Is, well, where do I start? And this is one that I often get from students. A really simple way to do that is to, before you go to bed, list the good things, at least one good thing that happened about your day, and list something that if you could change it, you would. What would you change about your day? And this doesn't mean what bad thing happened, because I feel like that is a defeatist attitude that says that this is a bad thing that happened and I don't have any control over my reaction to that. So I always frame the question, what could I change about my day? And that could be maybe a change in your actions. Maybe the student made a bad choice. It could be a change in the way you reacted to something. It could be a change in your thinking of a situation. Maybe your interpretation of something your friend said caused you to feel bad. And so I think this is an easy strategy. Of course, I always recommend writing it down. If you have the time and motivation to do that, is good, because we can reflect on that. That's also an excellent tool to bring to one of us as counselors. We would, I think, all be overjoyed to have a record like this and the student be comfortable enough to share that with us. But I think that even if students can think about that before bed, maybe think about, this is a great thing that happened. And man, this is something that I wish I could have changed. And maybe here's how I could have changed it. And that's just a good practice to get into building that first point that I mentioned in my presentation, that practice of metacognition, thinking about our thinking. And we can use that as counselors as the first step in our process.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. Trupti, I'm going to ask you the same question. Maybe, you would also like to tell us, when do you think, students feel it is the time to reach out? How should they ascertain that?
Yes, ma'am. So as Seth has already said that when we self-reflect, when anyone's self-reflect, they identify, yeah, there is something is bothering me. There are few signals. When you realize that your behavior has started interfering with your interpersonal relationship, your academics, and it's difficult for you to manage your emotions, then it's high time that you should ask for help, because when it start interfering with your relationships, you get cranky easily and you don't know the reason. I think that's the high time we should come forward, students should come forward and ask for help. I think these are some basic signals that each person can follow. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Trupti. Uh, I think we've had a couple of questions among ourselves. Maybe it's time now to actually go to our audience and see if they have some questions that the panel would like to answer. So I do see that there are some questions in our chat box, and maybe let me go with the first question. We have one of our attendees asking whether the slides of this are going to be shared later on, and she has complimented the presenters. She says it's very useful with all the information that's coming in, and she feels it can be used to practice at home as well as school. So just for all our listeners, yes, the idea is that we are going to share with you points that have emerged that you can use for your practice at home or in school. There's another question, and the question is, how do I support a child if they do not approach for help, or they do not even reveal what their problem is, but the parent or the adult can sense it? So maybe I'll throw this question first to Sabahat. Sabahat, you can advise, and then maybe our other counselors can share tips as well.
Sure. Yeah, this is a brilliant question. Parents are usually the first people to sense that something is not right with the child, or the child is not acting the same as he or she usually does. So I do feel like it's always a great step to teach by example. In that sense, I would say that if the parents start off by talking about their feelings, like saying, oh, I had a really tough day today at work, I had lots of meetings and I was unable to get to all of them, and just start by disclosing your personal, maybe things that went tough or struggles or some of your feelings, that enables the child to feel like, yes, he or she can also speak about their feelings, and they might go off of that.
Would Seth like to add something to it?
Sure. I think also that I agree with what Sabahat just said, that often parents are the first to understand that something is off. I think parents know their children best, and oftentimes will see a change in their behavior. I think the first thing that I would do is obviously maybe approach the child. And if they're unwilling to discuss or dismissive, the next step would maybe be just talk with the child's teacher. And typically, the next person that spends the most amount of time with your child is their teacher. And maybe the teacher has seen some things as well. And if that's the case, then the teacher can come to us and get us involved. And that may be in a minimal basis at first. It may be us giving the teacher some strategies to try. It might be us kind of in a very kind of unintrusive way come in the classroom and maybe do some activities with everyone so the student doesn't feel singled out. And gradually, we can track the progress of this child. And if things aren't getting any better, if those strategies that we've tried to use aren't working, maybe at that point, we as counselors can try to come in and maybe try to use some strategies to get the child to open up. So the only option is not just a one-on-one counseling session. I want parents and teachers to all, keep that in mind, that we are also here just to consult and give you all some tips to use in your classroom. And for some students who are reluctant to discuss their feelings, and maybe for some students who are resistant to being singled out, they don't want to be embarrassed. There are other ways that we can address their needs in a respectful and inclusive way.
I think that's a brilliant answer, Seth. Gauri and Tripti, would you just like to add to it?
Sure, ma'am. I think in my personal experience, this is one of the things which is always a concern, because we have a parent come and tell us that, this is what I'm feeling about my child. And, usually when they're in their teens and, where, friends are probably a better advisor than a parent or a teacher, but you notice behavioral changes. So maybe as counselors, we can go to classroom observations or as to how are they doing, ask the teachers about their behavioral changes, and maybe conduct like a group counseling session. So where you introduce yourself as a counselor, you explain your role to them, you assure them about things like confidentiality, and knowing that that you're an helping hand which is always there for them, available in school. So which will give them assurance, maybe not immediately, but over the course to build up that relationship and that trust so that they do come to us. Because otherwise, if you're going to particularly pinpoint a child in class, because that might be one of the major reasons holding that child back to coming for the session. So when you know that, and you've put that thing in order, it will really help the child to come, and we'll be able to definitely help.
So yes, ma'am, I completely agree that we need to talk to parents. Parents need to talk to class teacher. We can go for class observation. We can even observe non-academic activities also. Maybe the child is struggling, in the classroom. Maybe he's enjoying non-academic, so we can find a start point at least. And if he is not anymore interested in his co-curricular also, yeah, that's a huge sign, and we can go forward from that, and we can build a trust, and so that child can come to us, child can approach. Yes.
Thank you, Tripti. There is a question that is asked by Miss Rama Rajiv, and she is asking, can parents approach the school counselor and speak about their observations in their child's behavior? I think each of our counselors has mentioned that in their sets sharing as well as now while responding. Yes, parents are the first observers of what is happening with their children, most sensitive. So GIIS is open. We are always welcoming. If parents feel that there is something they are seeing in their children and they want to talk about it, if they feel there's something amiss, please feel free to approach our counselors, and you can share with them, and surely they are going to help you with most of the tips given right now on the panel. Uh, Let me ask another question that is put here, and this is with regards to confidentiality. The question, rather, it's an observation. Confidentiality is the key to success for counseling. So the question is, why are counselors failing to convince students about absolute confidentiality? And this, the writer, the observer feels, is stopping children from coming to counselors.
Uh,
So,
Maybe I could try answering since the first confidentiality point was by me.
sure, sure.
See, at times, what happens is, like I said, when a child is in danger or harming himself or herself, or someone is harming them, or they are harming someone, if in such a situation, there's no breach of confidentiality, but it's always a protocol to follow. So, but apart from that, like I mentioned, it's a legal and an ethical protocol which has to be followed as per any psychological institute across the globe, that confidentiality is the key. At points, we can take a consent form also stating that this will be confidential, but under these circumstances, we might have to report to a given authority or the parent, but yet your trust won't be breached. So, today, as a psychologist and as an educational counselor, I would assure every parent on the panel over here that we maintain absolute confidentiality of each of your child's concerns, problems, issues, and not go beyond, because more than anything, it is mental health is such a platform that it comes from within you to want to help and make this world a better place for everybody. So I'm sure all the other four counselors on the panel will agree that we assure each one that confidentiality is absolutely maintained at any point. If the child has felt, I am ready to clarify from my end that we absolutely maintain the ground of confidentiality, including Melissa ma'am. I'm sure she's a counselor as well, and she has students who come and talk. I'm sure she'll never go and discuss or tell another person about it. So take our word for that for sure.
Yeah. I think the point that is being made by Gauri and all our other panelists is that if there is a sense, if children have this feeling that their confidentiality is being breached, let us as adults reassure them that that is a very important part of what we do, to ensure their well-being. We are going to uphold confidentiality. However, there are times when we may need to talk about it, but we will always do that by keeping the child informed that this is what we are going to do, this is whom we are going to talk to. So I think all our collective efforts in reassuring children will help them understand that we are going to maintain confidentiality. And so let me remind everyone on who's listening, we have the healthline. That's a completely confidential platform. So children can be encouraged to go and write there. There's another question that is coming in from Roshni Ghosh Dastidar. She is, her question is, how can a parent explain to her child good touch and bad touch? Because sometimes child and parent are both shy. Sometimes teachers are also shy. So anybody on the panel who would like to respond to this?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to take up this question because we in GIS are trying to promote such a talk. We're trying to promote the talk of good touch, bad touch, and so on and so forth. So basically, this is something called sex education that we try to give to the students. And what we mean by sex education is to help them understand those topics that maybe we are not so open about or we don't openly discuss about. So especially, I think teachers here can play a big role in talking about good touch, bad touch. And then again, how can a parent explain? Well, I would say that a parent, I think, needs to understand and get to the level of the child and discuss with the child of these are the facts and keep it as very straightforward. Like, how do we teach our child this is good behavior, this is bad behavior, you cannot hit somebody, you cannot punch somebody? Similarly, like that as well. And there's countless videos and resources that you can find to share such a thing and to make it like an interactive session with the child itself.
Anybody else would like to add on the panel?
I also think that absolutely we can tie that into expected and unexpected behavior. I feel like a lot of it's really common, and I think I'm guilty of this as well. I would say all of us as counselors are guilty of this, is we like to call things good and bad. That's all context based. And I think a good way to reframe behavior, and maybe a way that students can understand it better, is expected and unexpected. So in this context, this is okay. In this context, this is not okay. And I think that when we start to kind of take away the taboos of talking about inappropriate touch, good touch, bad touch, we should reframe it as this is the expected behavior. You know, you're not expected to hit, punch, and kick. So you're also not expected to touch people in ways they don't want to be touched. And reframing the conversation into expectations might help the students understand that, you know, in this situation, this is what I should be doing. We should always try to teach what we should be doing instead of what we shouldn't be doing, right? And I think even young children feel a little bit more secure, and they understand that better because they know, okay, this is what I should be doing, and they have a clear answer. So hopefully that makes things a little easier to talk about, because these topics can be a little bit uncomfortable for teachers and parents to address. And so framing it as this is the behavior we should be exhibiting might make that a little bit easier.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. There is another question. Maybe I need to ask this. Lydia is asking, how does one manage mood swings in teenagers? Tripti, would you want to share?
Yeah, ma'am. So mood swings, we have even discussed in the presentation also, that if you self reflect, you will be able to identify that what is going on. What in teenager, it's very common, because it's time where they struggle with their moods and friends become more important. So it's very important to self reflect and find out the causes. And yes, you can even maintain a journal, and you can talk to your anytime you can talk to your school counselor, and you can reach to healthline if you are struggling, definitely. Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Ma'am, I think I'll add a little to that.
Sure.
Mood swings are something that usually arise with the fact that when you don't know what emotion are you exactly feeling, and you're not ready to address that emotion or accept that emotion. So it's very important that the parent encourages the child to speak about the emotion at that very moment when he or she is experiencing that mood swing and the parent is noticing it. Because lashing out on the child when the child is having a mood swing, it's going to be a bigger fight. So when you address the emotion, you might have the child even cry at that point, but that release of that emotion will calm the child down automatically. So in mood swing, it is very, very essential that the child addresses, accepts, and understands the emotion they are feeling and works on that. And plus, obviously, as counselors, if the emotion is too overwhelming and they've addressed it and then they don't know how to deal with it, well, we are right here for all of them to take that step forward and help them deal with that emotion. So at that point, yes, addressing the emotions, and then simple techniques like probably taking deep breaths while you're doing it, counting back from 10 to 0 always helps calm you down when you're having a mood swing. maybe taking a little break and getting some me time is always also important. So sometimes when parents are experiencing that the child is feeling overwhelmed, maybe leaving the child aside in their own personal space also will help them calm down, and then going and addressing the topic will, where they talk about their emotions and how they felt. Plus the parent can also express that when you were behaving like this is how I also felt. So again, like how Seth was giving an example, when you exchange emotions, you feel that okay, I someone is in the same boat as mine, so they are understanding what I'm also going through. So that makes a lot of difference as well.
Well, I think we have, exhausted our time for today's webinar. We've reached the end, and I think we'll have to thank everyone who's on the panel. And we've got actually lots of questions. So just to all our, audience, please note that we would be sharing with you a pamphlet, covering the key points. Before we close, I once again want to remind all our parents that GIS Healthline platform is meant for all our students. It's completely confidential. It can be accessed by all our students through a WhatsApp number. All those students who are feeling overwhelmed, please reach out on this WhatsApp number, and all our counselors will be there to help you. I firmly believe that together we can help all our children deal with the issues that they come and they face very effectively, so that we make them strong human beings and prepare them for the world that they are to face. I want to honestly and sincerely thank our panelists who have taken time to prepare for this webinar and who have shared so very generously of all their ideas and thoughts, and very willingly, kind of answered all the questions. I want to reassure all parents and all our listeners that we are here so that we are there to help your children. This is a series that we've been doing. This is our third in line, and we are more than happy to conduct more. If there are any topics of interest, do let us know. Write into your school counselors, write into the school principals, and we will definitely organize more such. Thank you once again to all our panelists. And to all our listeners, one last point I would like to make, that today responses that were given on the panel are pretty general. They are generic responses. We need to tell you, and we want to tell you, that it is never a one size fit for all solutions. All our students are individuals and they are very unique. And every counselor who's with GIIS works on a one-to-one basis with the students that come to them. So I would like to reassure all our listeners that all our children are important to us and our counselors treat them with that. Lastly, I would like to thank the management and all the organizing team, our tech team, our Marcom team, who are helping us put this webinar together. Let all of us reassure you that we will strive to keep this initiative going in full force. With this, we come to the end of the webinar. Thank you to all the counselors and thank you to all our attendees.
Thank you so much, ma'am, as well. Thank you so much.